Hello everyone, Ecotech here. In this video I'll give you an update on my project. First thing is we'll talk about the sensors that I've added in the last video, and the second big announcement and subject is that I've been testing my new custom grow lights that you can see running right there on this level. So our first update on the sensor is that the board is running well. I've added the pH sensor. I haven't fixed the CO2 issue, but here you have the pH probe. If we look at the data, you can see that the humidity right now, well, in the past was constant. Then when I was running experiments in the room and playing with the setup, the humidity would fluctuate a lot. Currently, we are the 30th of January. It is 340. The humidity, so this lets me know if these measurements are when they were taken, basically. You can see the humidity is at 43. The pH is at 1.6. Do not freak out. This is an error we'll talk about in a bit. And the temperature is at 23.3. Slowly rising, the temperature in the past day. So the blue line is the temperature, fairly stable. It's been going up a bit. The pH, so now why is the pH dropping? You can see in red the pH curve is fairly consistent at the beginning, and then it drops, comes back, drops, and gives us random information. So this blue curve is the same as the red, just shrunk. When we're here in this region, over at the peaks, the measurements are a bit noisy, but overall close to what I'm reading with a typical pH probe. Then it drops. I don't know why. If you know why this can happen, please let me know. And then it comes back on its own. I'm thinking maybe it's the bubbles coming in and leaving. I'm not too sure. Side note, the water in my reservoir is currently yellow because I'm growing in hemp. So hemp, if I pull out this tray, this is hemp. And it discolors a bit my water tank. I don't know if it has a bad effect. Please let me know if you know more. Why do I grow in hemp? Well, it's easier to set up. It's cleaner than dirt to run inside an apartment. So if you look, I'm not in a typical grow room. The only downside is that I've noticed is that you need to have very consistent watering. If you don't water it for a day, you'll lose a tray. But since I have these two shelves running on my automatic watering with the inputs on this side, the outputs there, I'm able to run it fairly well. So I'm watering once in the morning, once in the evening. The fan runs right after watering to try and get rid of the water that can stagnate here. Well, it doesn't stagnate, but it just, it dries a bit, and try to get the humidity a bit down. You can see that there's water and the roots are doing fine. So, now that we've covered the sensors, let's change subject and talk about this. This is my new grow light. This is the Ecotech grow light that I've custom designed and built for Microgreen. So if we connect this as a Meanwell power supply, just as test power supply, if I connect this to the bar, let me just, whoop, there we go. The LEDs turn on. This is roughly 50 centimeters by 3 centimeters. Reason being is that you can just take them and slide them in your typical microgreen grow shelf. So if we demonstrate, whoop, you just insert it. One hand is a bit tricky. There we go. You can just put the bar, and then imagine it was this bar. I would come in with the connector, one hand. Can I do it? Yes, I can. And you can connect it. So far, I'm running experiments to see how the plants like it, and running some numbers to make sure, and running it as well as a grower to see what I like, dislike about it, what can be changed for the next iteration. First thing I will change is this connector. Currently on the LEDs, it is this connector on it. I will switch to this one, which increases the cost a bit, but it's just more convenient. The connector on the ribbon cable I'm fairly satisfied with. I might have to add some safety features, but that's another discussion. Like, this connector just goes on the ribbon cable. You can set it to whatever distance you want. then you clamp it and it makes contact. And this allows you to have, if we come in from this side, you can see that within the same cable, I'm connecting all this shelf, and then the cable runs down, and there's the power supply in the back. So I've been running a cheap Amazon power supply for the past few weeks, reason being that it was fast delivery. Recently, actually yesterday, I've received 2 new power supplies. So meanwhile, they're just more efficient, they're a bigger brand, they better quality hopefully. So these should be 90% efficiency. On the power supply I'm currently using, I measured 80% efficiency, so this should be a step up. On this shelf you can see have a few far red, deep red LEDs experiments to play with. This was version 1 of the PCB. I have version 2, which was on typical PCB, but then realized that aluminum backing was the way to go. It's just stiffer, the thermals are better, there's a lot of advantages to it. So microgreens, I'm back to running microgreens, and the reason I'm growing a few different types and the same on each shelf is to compare the growth on both levels, with the only difference being the light. So the custom Ecotech lights are on this shelf, and the Barina lights are on this shelf. You can see that the trays look fairly similar, but once we look closely, there are some differences. So on this one, there's a lot of seed hulls still on the crops, and there's a lot of leaves over here that are still small and curly. They're not as good looking, if I may, than compared to a few of them. Like this one is good, but this one isn't doing great, for example. When we compare it to this shelf, we still have seed hulls, and we still have some of the leaves that aren't looking great, but overall a lot more of them are looking good. Now let's keep in mind that these were planted last Saturday, so it's been a week. These should be harvested Tuesday. So if we look at my planter, you can see that I've planted them Saturday, and some of them will get harvested Monday, some Friday, some Wednesday. So this is by the way, my Google sheet that I can just fill in. Let me show you an example. I can tell it, let's grow, I don't know, kale. I am planting 3 trays just to keep track, planting it in hemp. It'll tell me how many, like the grams I need to plant. Then I can tell him, let's put a random date, what date I'm planting, and it'll give me which day it should go under the light and which day I should harvest, as well with a timeline on when this is. So you can see I've stopped producing for a long time, focusing on more of the technology. So yeah, that was a small side note. If we go back to the lights, so I've been able to measure the watts that each light was using and the light. So this is a lux meter. I still don't have a par meter. Whoops, sorry, it's turning on. And what a lux meter does is it measures the light intensity. So if we have it, for example, here, you can see 800, but if I put it there, it's at 400 times 10, so 7,000. With this, I've taken intensity measurements from the same distance. So I put the sensor at 24 centimeters from the grow light and 24 centimeters from the Barina. And if we look in the back, I'm actually I'll grow hydroponically, few lettuces and other crops like peppers. I realized today that this light burnt out, but back when I did the measurements, both lights were running. This is the Sun Blaster typical lights that everyone uses. So I took the power measurements and the light intensity measurements and put all of this information in here. So if we look on the left, the watts here, you have the Barina lights that are drawing 40 watts, give or take. The Sun Blaster are drawing 80 watts, and the Ecotech light is drawing 51 watts. Now I see a lot of people in the microgreens business, they use the wattage as a reference. And if you use that, you would think the Sun Blaster is best, right? Well, the truth is that no, you shouldn't be using watts, because watts measures the energy that you're pulling out of the grid, out of your out of here in the electrical socket. But the plants don't care about that. What they care about is how much light is getting to the canopy. So if we look at the light intensity, I took down some numbers, looked at the average, and used the micro conversion number. So Micro did a video where he used this lux meter and compared it to his apogee par meter. And what a par meter does is it counts the number of photons. So by using his conversion, I was able to get a rough micromoles per second measurement, which in other words is I was able to get the number of photons hitting a certain area every second. And if we look at that number, the plants, they care about that number. And you can see that the Burina is still last. The Sunblaster is second, producing 104 micromoles per second at a hanging height of 24 centimeters for all three. And the Ecotech, although it was between the power levels of the Sunblaster and the Burina, the Ecotech was producing a lot more light. So if we take this number, which the microgreens care about, and we divide it by the watts, which we care about because of our electricity bill, we get an overall efficiency measurement. So micromoles per second per watt, which is a number that's fairly important. And when we look at the Burina, we see that it takes 1.24 watts, 29 watts, sorry, to produce a micromole per second. The Sunblaster is not far behind with 1.3 micromoles per watt. And my custom light was running at 2.37 micromoles per watt, per second per watt. So overall, I'm getting close to double the efficiency with this custom light. And that measurement was taken with the cheap, the old power supplies. I'm expecting to get better results with these two. I'll run more tests later with these two power supplies. So overall, we see that the plant growth I've covered the radish, but the wheatgrass is growing better than the Burina. The pak choi is comparable, and the sunflowers, I can't take them into account because I've had an issue where you can see that they have the red stems, which means that they were lacking water at a certain time, versus these ones, they weren't. So I've had to hand water this, so it takes them out of the comparison. But overall, these two trays are growing better under the custom lights. This one is roughly the same. I'll compare them at harvest and we'll see. But electrically, the custom lights are better, and so far, the microgreens seem to prefer this light. Now, a few things that I haven't talked about so far and played with this light that I would think makes it better than the next one is that the light is spread out over a larger area. And unlike these where you have two tubes, this will allow me to bring these lights closer and close this gap to get a denser setup. Ventilation will become more of a concern, but the diffusion of the light won't be an issue. So if let's look at this example, right? Light is emitted at a point and then it spreads out, right? So this spreading out has a few other impacts, but the main thing is that you need space, you need height to give the light time to spread. And the other thing that's important, so here they're comparing reflectors, but the main idea I want to convey with this is that there's heat spots right under a given light, and then depending on how it's set up, it's more or less evenly spread out. And this is very hard to do with these type of incandescent or bulbs. It's very hard, but with the LEDs, you're able to just spread out the LEDs themselves and get a more even spread of the light to begin with, which then if you have an even spread out light, you don't need as much height to spread it out for you. So I'll be able to shrink this and get a more dense setup. Now the installation, I tend to prefer it. The thermals is also good. But the last interesting thing I'll be able to play with the new power supplies is that this one gets a dimmer, so voltage setup, and this one has voltage and current. So I'll be able to underdrive the lights and produce more or less light, as well as overdrive them if there's some crops that need more power. It's just twist the knob, get more or less light. And something, the last point I really like about these lights is that, as I've shown, I can just simply add another one. Right, like there you go. I could just take a connector, add this connector here like this, and then plug this light, and all of a sudden I have even more light. So this is a very modular design where if you're growing microgreens, you need few bars and you space them out. But if you're growing more energy intensive crops like tomatoes or cucumbers or peppers or whatever you want to grow, you could just add few strips to increase the power and grow them, and without having to purchase new dedicated lights. So they're very modular and you can just change the setup according to what you want to grow. So I think that covers most of what I wanted to update you guys on. If you have any questions, please let me know down in the comments. Thank you for sticking this long. If you are still here, drop a like. It actually really motivates me. That's about it. Thank you guys. Have a great day. Bye.